to see the pictures that are on or not.
So we're recording, as Mary said. Let's share.
You can hit participants and get those off so it's not there. Yeah. Now share. There you go. Okay.
Oh my goodness.
So this is no, this is not baptism day. This is just, so Finley has lots of expressions. What do you say?
She does those eyebrows. She does. She gets looks that I've never seen on a baby before. So let's.
Getting big, man. She's growing.
Oh.
Here's Mary making poor baby Finley cry.
Quit pinching her, Mary.
Oh.
So that is baptism day. They came to the church without Finley in her baptism outfit. So Amanda's texting me, says, meet me in the back of the church. You have to help me put this on her. And this was Amanda's baptismal outfit when she was baptized, and she was also baptized on Easter Sunday. So
Oh.
Oh my goodness. She's getting big, man.
there we go.
Yeah.
There is Amanda, and that's Elise, her partner.
And this is a close-up of one of those faces. I love it.
She's thinking.
So
That's her back face.
Precious.
and since you got a list, I'm going to do that, but I'm going to take a minute. We're recording. You know, I haven't kept it a secret that these people that come into our lives, they're like, I always say we act like they're part of the furniture. We don't see them. They're invisible. We were at this church, and the other thing I mentioned to you a few weeks ago was Gnosticism. And I know people don't always understand why I go on these tirades, but I'm going to tell you two stories. We're in that church in a section that's designed for kids. It's a little alcove. And a guy walked in who is just about our daughter's age, has a little ink on his face, backpack, you know, kind of dirty, and nobody looked at it. And except I did, because I do. And he got up before the end of the service and left. If he had been panhandling, you know, some people do come and they're trying to get in. The church is a good place to look for handouts, but he didn't. He got up and left early, and I put the camera down and ran outside. I have this belief that nobody should leave church without somebody noticing them. And I told him that, and I put up my hand. I said, I'm Scott. And he looked at me, and it was just heart-wrenching. He says, my hands aren't clean. And I think, you know, it carried more weight than just living on the street. And of course, I told him, pardon me, I told him your hands are fine, your hands are clean. His name is Lee. But it was one of those examples of, even in a church, when someone shows up like that, people put blinders on because you don't want to get your hands dirty. You want to have to talk to people, and he might ask you for money. You know, he could be one of those people. And so there were people around that were outside just, you know, for whatever reason. And no, it's like they always say that, you know, when someone is panhandling, don't make eye contact. That's one of the rules that they give. Well, that's how this was in a church. And so this thing that I've been talking about was on display, and it was, you know, it was hard. And part of it is, I think if he comes back, I'm not going to be there to talk to him. And it you know, it's a difficult thing. But the other one is, they did a reading for Easter, of course, and they claimed they were doing it from the First Nations Bible, you know, Native American, Indian, my people, so I can say Indian if I want to, but the First Nations Bible. But there's a point where Mary says, they've taken my master away.
Mary Magdalene.
Mary Magdalene says, they've taken my master away, and I don't know where they've put him. She's speaking to an angel. Well, they turn that into, she says, my wisdom keeper has been taken away and I don't know where they've put him. And I know a lot of the people don't know what wisdom keeper is, but it is this new age pagan, keeping in touch with Earth Mother, reconnecting with the Earth Mother stuff. It isn't even Native American. It's a new thing, and it sounds good, I guess. You know, people. It's a very, can I say it? It's a very rich white liberal church, and so they tell themselves they're doing this great thing by putting in Native American characters into the Bible. But Wisdom Keeper is this, like I said, it is very, very pagan. If you look up wisdom keepers on Google and see what's going on, well, these are the things that I get sort of wrapped up about. It's like the Gnostics. In fact, some of the stuff is Gnostic, but you begin bringing things in, and after a while, people don't know the difference. And there's a great difference. It does matter. And so the two things that I've been sort of on a tear about for the last few weeks were just on display in this place. It does matter. We may not be able to understand everything in the scriptures, but when we start bringing in things that are absolutely the antithesis of it, it has an effect, and eventually those things take root in a lot of places. So enough. That's the last of my soapbox on those two subjects, and let's move on. Gene, I can tell you, your cards and your prayers have meant the world to him. He is still not doing well. He says he's going to get results from an important test this week, but it was obvious from the comments that some of you sent cards and sent wishes, and he knows that we're praying for him, and it has made a tremendous difference. And
he wrote an email, and I just want to quote one thing because it was beautiful to me. Our community is love and worldly practice. So if that isn't sort of the opposite of what Scott just was saying, that was anyhow. So keep him in your prayers.
Julie's son Colin, who we've been praying for, has, you know, he appears to be, he's walking better. He's improved. It's still not easy, but this is a definite improvement over the last few weeks, and we're grateful for that. Luis's mother, is Luis out? There's Luis. Yeah. Luis's mother, he's, you know, wanting us to remember her in our prayers. She has some kidney function problems, and it's not good. That's his word. So keep her in mind. And all of a sudden, it's not Carmen. What is your mother's name? What is his mother's name? Senora, is it Senora Carmen?
Luis?
He can't see.
Oh,
It's all right.
Maria.
Yeah. All right. And I'm sorry, but
It's
I like
Maria.
Maria, sorry. I like to have names on that. Kathy's not with us. Alton, with the pain from the cancer and the treatment, has been difficult. And our friend Phil and Cherie with the dealing with Parkinson's. Remember them in your prayers. They it matters. It really, really does. And then finally, our wayward son Peter is back in jail, and you know, it could be really serious. This is, you know, any time with his background, but it could be really serious. So keep Mary in your prayers too. This is really, really hard. Not that I don't care, but it really hits her. So God, we always try to remember to come to you in thanks. We see in these studies this long plan that you have that includes us and that was put in place for us. And we have these people that are in our lives that we have such concern for, and we know you do too, but I think we're supposed to remember to come to you, trust and rely on you. And we see in this lesson, this study we're about to start, these things that happen that are magnificent, and we see your plan in them, but we also see things that we know were painful, that were difficult for the people, and we're able to see your plan in those too, because we have distance, and it makes more sense. help us to see that, that as we go through these things that are part of our daily life, your plan is here. Your plan is good, and we're part of it. Help us with the study to get those things, to find your ways in your heart. Amen.
Amen.
Could you hand me,
The Bible,
yeah, the Bible?
the mouse,
The mouse, and I just want to,
and I'm gonna go get those sheets I printed while you start.
okay,
No, you did.
then I'm gonna do. Okay, so we are starting a new study on Jacob. And that takes us back to the Old Testament again. And Jacob starts in the book of Genesis. And I was telling Scott that I think if you ask most people just in the world, so what is the book of Genesis in the Bible about? I think they would say creation. You know, I think that's what would come out of their mouth. And just, you know, I like to do some of the tidbits of information that I think it's just important for us to know. The book of Genesis is 50 chapters. Creation, Noah, the fall and Noah are the first 11 chapters of those 50 chapters. So there's a lot of Genesis that goes beyond the creation and beyond the fall and beyond Noah. And that's where we're going to take up Jacob's life. And the rest, chapters 12 through 50, is basically about one family. And Scott's going to talk about the importance of this family in a second. And that's Abraham's family. And so, you know, just to put it in perspective, and the other thing before I hand it over to Scott to show, you know, why are we studying Jacob and the importance of Jacob, is I like to do the timeline. And so, and I know, there are people out there that say, you know, Abraham was born in 1976 BC. Come on. I just like to give some general ideas. So if you go back to when people believe Adam was here, Adam, 4000 BC, okay? Noah, 3500 BC. So 500 years after Adam. Abraham, remember Abraham had, God made a covenant with him. We'll talk about him. That was 2000 BC. So 2000 years before Christ. Moses, 1500. King David, which we studied, 1000 BC. And Daniel the lion was 600 BC. So that gives you an idea. We have such a short time thing of waiting for God's answers for things or anything. And I just love putting that in perspective. And I know it just bugs you with the times. But
She actually got one off the internet last night, and it had
Adam.
Noah
Oh.
coming before Adam. I said, did and she says, I swear that's what it says, and it did. That's a very rough timeline.
That's right. But in relative terms, it's correct, right? Okay. So why is this important, and why is studying, what's the deal with Abraham's family?
So to begin with, and Mary mentioned it, really the entire Bible, you know, maybe with the exception of those first 11 chapters, is about one family. It really, really is. It is Abraham, his descendants, and we see that Abraham, there's one point where it says that Abraham believed God and it was counted unto him as righteousness. God begins dealing with Abraham in a way that's unprecedented. And without going into, you know, history of the world part 1, he's selected, he is recognized, and God tells him, your descendants, you're going to be the father of your descendants will be like the sands on the shore, you know, count the stars, and that's what it's going to be like. You're going to have a lot of descendants. But he tells him, through you and through your line, all the nations of the world will be blessed. And it's really a clear reference to the fact that Messiah, the deliverer, Jesus, is going to come through his line. And I've told you before that when it says that, people talk about the Jews being God's chosen people, it doesn't mean that he chose them to the exclusion of everyone else, that, they get all the good stuff and everyone else gets the leftovers. It is through that line that God's deliverance and reconciliation, that we're brought into that reconciliation with God through his line. And I have just, I probably won't read them all, but it gets repeated. Abraham, what do they say? In Abraham begat Isaac. Abraham's son Isaac gets this same exact promise in a little different setting. He says, through your descendants, through your line, all the nations of the world will be blessed. And then we get Jacob, who's Isaac's son. And we're going to cover that because we're studying Jacob. But Jacob gets this same promise. The blessing of Abraham, there's a point where Isaac tells Jacob, may you receive the blessing of Abraham. And if you really go through this, you begin to realize that can only mean one thing. He inherits lots of possessions. He inherits lots of sheep and goats and stuff. And we get that. But that's not the blessing of Abraham. The blessing of Abraham is that assurance that through your line, all the nations of the world will be blessed. And that is the idea that this family, this lineage winds up being the one where Messiah will come. And it's amazingly consistent. Everything just keeps pointing to it all through the Bible. And so even though we get into some of the stuff like I don't know, Deuteronomy or Leviticus is the one I was struggling for, Leviticus. But it is the law because it applies to these people. And they get the 10 Commandments are they're not law in that you're going to be perfect. This is about how they can play together nicely, how you can live in a community. So it is about this family. It is about this lineage all the way through. And if you see that thread, if you recognize it, all of a sudden, a lot of the things in even the Old Testament make more sense. And they're also maybe a little less boring, a little less tedious, because what you see is that God's plan has been amazingly long and amazingly consistent over thousands and thousands of years. And in these different stories, we get, I like to say it's a different flavor of the same ice cream. It's not some new thing that happens. It's a continuation of a very well spelled out, clear plan if we just go looking for it. So that's why we're taking Jacob. He just happens to be one that is I think fruitful to study. Is that good?
Yes, and we're going to start with Genesis chapter 25. And the first mention of Jacob's, we need to start at verse 19. This is the account of Abraham's son, Isaac. Abraham became the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean from Pandan Aram, and the sister of Laban, the Aramean. Later, Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren, and the Lord heard his prayer, and his wife Rebekah conceived. So the important thing to know there, just to remind you, Abraham was married to Sarah, and Sarah was barren. They didn't pray to God to say, hey, let's fix this. Instead, Sarah said, okay, God gave Abraham a promise, and I'm going to help God out. And so Abraham can sleep with Hagar, our maidservant, and have a child. And they had Ishmael first, and then they had Isaac. So Sarah stepped in and helped out. Here, the next generation, Rebekah is barren, but something different happens here. Isaac prays to God.
So you know, sometimes it comes up how important the family, the descendants, the lineage, it's sometimes referred to as the house. In those times, your descendants, and I hate to say it, but your sons, because the oldest son is the one with the birthright, but it is very, very important. And back in that early time with Abraham, he was Abram at the time, but God tells him, you know, you're going to have your descendants will be like the stars in the sky. And Abraham's wife has not conceived any children.
And they're old.
And they're getting older and older. And he gets a reassurance. God tells him this is the way it's going to be. That was the thing that Abraham believed, and it was counted unto him as righteousness. That's where that line comes from. At his age, in that situation, if she hasn't conceived a child by then, chances are she's not going to. And yet he gets this assurance from God, and he says, okay, I believe it. And apparently it's true belief, you know, one of those that you don't just pay lip service to. And then you come down with the same, and as you know, Mary talked about, Sarah, his wife, it's a shameful thing to not have children. That's a big part of her duty. And so she's the one who says, I tell you what, you got a maidservant, have a baby with her, and it'll be like mine. Which we do that. We think, you know, I think God's plan is fine, but he must need a little help. And we step in to try and you know, do things ourselves. But in this case, Isaac is in sort of that same situation, but instead of sort of despairing or thinking he's got to help God out, he prays to God for his wife, and she does in fact have a son. And it's intended to be sort of a contrast. But what you see, the big thing you want to understand, when I talked about this being the story of this one family, having a tribe, having your descendants become a whole nation, they all dreamed of something like that. You know, when you bless someone, may you be fruitful and your children be many. And they've been told that their descendants would be plentiful, and yet here they are with no children. And it repeats itself. This promise that comes down that your descendants will be many, and through your descendants, all people will be blessed. They've got to take that on faith. And that faith is tested. I mean, it's difficult when you begin seeing, how is that possible? And we even read that some of them say that. I know what you say, but how is it possible? What can you possibly do now? We're too old to have children. And this is part of the story of this family. So, you know, it may seem like small things, but it's an important part of who they've been. Like Abraham, they remain faithful. They believe even when it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
But the children inside her struggled with each other, and she said, why is this happening to me? So Rebekah went to inquire of the Lord, and he declared to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 people from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. When her time came to give birth, there was indeed twins in her womb. The first one came out red, covered with hair like a fur coat. So they named him Esau. After this, his brother came out, grasping Esau's heel. So he was named Jacob. And Isaac was 60 years old when the twins were born. When the boys grew up, Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man who stayed at home. Because Isaac had a taste for wild game, he loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob.
So a lot packed into that. This battle going on between these 2 babies in the womb must have been, it must have been pretty, pretty noticeable, because she's wondering, why is this happening to me? I mean, this is not, I mean, you feel a baby move and it's a wonderful thing. This is not that. And the two of them are, they're battling even in the womb, and she goes to God, which is, probably a good choice. We should go and she asks God, why is this happening? Now, how do you get the message that detailed? Have we lost something? We see that on a couple of occasions. I've experienced this, but the rest of the time, I don't know how it happens, but she gets this instruction that these two babies are both going to be, the fathers of and there's two nations inside of you. And that's it's an interesting kind of a thing, that both of them are gonna have these huge families, but they're going to be separate, distinct nations. And he says that the younger or the older will serve the younger, which doesn't happen. It's not supposed to happen. Actually, it does. But someone's got to be the leader of the tribe. And the way it works is that the oldest firstborn becomes the leader. He becomes the new family leader. And yet she's told that in this case, the older one is going to serve the younger one. So, there's a lot being revealed in this. And then the babies are born, and the oldest one is hairy. And that sounds odd, except I've seen photos. This happens. It's not impossible. Like a fur coat seems, but I've seen some that are, some babies are born with hair like that on their body, but he's red, and he has red hair. And in fact, his descendants, if you read the Bible and you go through Old Testament stuff, you read about the Edomites. The Edomites have a really high incidence of red hair. They are descendants of Esau, and that red hair is a pretty common thing. But Esau is born first, and even though they're twins, and even though it's usually a matter of minutes, the firstborn son becomes the leader. He gets the birthright. He becomes the leader of the tribe. And it says that Jacob actually comes out grasping his older brother's heel. And that name, Jacob, means the grasper, one who grasps. And we're going to see throughout Jacob's lifetime, it's pretty true of his personality. I'll tell you a quick story. When we're in Israel, I went one morning, I was buying bagel or something, this bread, and the vendor cheated me out of, I don't know how much, a dime or something, but he clearly made false change on purpose. And I just let it go, which, they'll tell you you're a fool if you do that. But I had seen it enough. The people live like that every day of their lives, every single day. If they can come out a nickel ahead on a transaction, they'll do it. And you are instructed to be constantly on guard, because if you get taken advantage of, it's your fault. And I kind of laughed. I said, at the end of a lifetime living like this, you're probably going to be hundreds of dollars ahead. I mean, over a lifetime, that's the most you could hope for. And that grasping nature, people make jokes. It's not a joke. It's a cultural thing. But what we see in Jacob, and he's sort of the father of the nation, that Jacob is constantly grabbing. He's constantly grasping. And some people will say it means deceiver. It does not. This picture of this baby who, I'm sure he would want to be the first, and he's not, but you're not going to get out very far ahead of me. And he's literally grasping the heel of his brother as he's born. And that's what they named him, Jacob, the one who grasps.
One day, the other thing it says here that Jacob, Isaac was 60 when the baby was born. So he got married when he was 40, and they had this baby when they were 60.
Well, and we should probably not skip over the fact that Esau, the firstborn, the hairy one, is a man's man. He's a hunter, and his dad likes fresh game. And we have parents favoring one child over another. And so says Isaac favors Esau, and the mother favors Jacob, and he stays, close to home. And it says he's it's not exactly a gentleman, but
Quiet man.
a quiet man. It's somebody that doesn't ruffle a lot of feathers, and he stays at home. So we have parents who are playing favorites, and that's also sort of a problem.
One day, while Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the fields and was famished. He said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stew, for I am famished." That is why he was also called Edom. "First, sell me your birthright," Jacob replied. "Look," said Esau, "I'm about to die, so what good is a birthright to me?" "Swear to me first," Jacob said. So Esau swore to Jacob and sold him the birthright. Then Jacob gave some bread and lentil stew to Esau, who ate and drank, and then got up and went away. Thus Esau despised his birthright. I always thought this was the strangest story. I mean, I just think, seriously, he sold his birthright for stew, and he's a hunter, and he's gonna die because he's famished. I mean, go ahead.
It's not as strange as it sounds. It says Esau comes in from the fields, and that and you heard earlier that same term, he's been out hunting. Clearly it hasn't been a successful hunt, but he's been out for at least days on a hunting trip. And you've got to picture, this family is rich. They are very, very wealthy. And he's sort of this, devil may care, because they're rich, he doesn't have to go out and work in the fields like some people. Most of us have known, or at least known of, children of very rich families that are not really responsible. Can I say that nicely? And they're in the newspaper, and they drive their expensive cars, and they just man about town. Well, he's been out doing what he loves to do, and he comes in hungry. Jacob has made, and there's reason to think what this is lentils. As it happens, over the Easter weekend, Amanda cannot eat very many things because the baby's allergic, and I made lentils, and they're red. It's and so he has made this stew that probably contains lentils and is very red. And here comes the rich boy, and he knows he's the oldest from the start. He knows he's I'm the guy. You're my little brother. And he comes in famished. He just says, "Give me some of that stew. I'm dying here." Jacob says, "First, sell me your birthright. You got to promise to me that's going to be the price." I don't know. We're not told. Is Esau, does he even think this is a thing? Does he believe it or whatever? But what he says is, "Yeah, you know what? I'm going to die if I don't get some food. What use is a birthright?" And so he promises. And Jacob says, "No, I mean, you need to swear an oath." Yeah, whatever. Now give me the stew. And it says that Esau despised his birthright. This gets lost. But remember what I told you about the blessing of Abraham, about being part of this lineage. The birthright, the blessing of Abraham, they are the lineage of Messiah, of Mashiach. And Esau doesn't care. He just, it's no big deal to me. Jacob does care. And I don't know if it's the stuff or being the head of the family at this point in his life, but Jacob cares. And it says Esau despised his birthright. In other words, he didn't care. Of despise doesn't mean like I hate you, but it's just, it wasn't important to him. Now imagine being part of this lineage
Promised covenant from
of
God.
the Messiah, and being someone who just doesn't care about it. There are times through history, this idea of the firstborn son, the kingdom is handed down to the firstborn son. And yet there are times where that's violated because the oldest son is just not acceptable. You see, I mean, it's the rule, but sometimes we break the rule when the oldest son is just not fit to be king. And that's kind of the thing here, except Esau, with that cavalier attitude, He's not suitable to be the one who carries this lineage on. And this is the beginning of it. Is it odd that he says, sell me your birthright for some stew? I guess it is, but he may also, yes, sir.
Does all the material possessions along with the title and responsibility go with the birthright?
Bob asked, does all of the material possessions go along with the birthright? And there are birthrights in a lot of cultures that vary in how they work. But how it works here is that the oldest gets a double portion. So if there are 2 children, you treat it like 3, and the oldest gets 2 shares and the youngest gets 1. If there are 4 kids, the oldest gets 2 and the other 3 get 1. So the oldest always gets twice what the other ones get. There are times where, you know, cultures, but that's how it's supposed to work. It's a really good question.
Well, because I asked because we lived in Fredericksburg for 20 years, and there, the old German family, the eldest, got everything. And it was up to him if he shared with the younger.
That is very European. It is. And Bob's talking about a German family that the oldest gets everything and it's up to him to share. And that is right. It varies from culture to culture and from time to time, but that's very European. And so what would happen is the younger sons would wind up being put in the church to be priests because they didn't really have any future ahead of them. They didn't inherit anything. You're absolutely right. The way this is supposed to work at this point with these people is you get a double portion. But what the oldest does get is the leadership position. He's the new head of the household, head of the family. And that's sort of a big deal too.
We're going to not read chapter 26 because Jacob is not mentioned in chapter 26, but Scott's going to give a summation of chapter 26. I told you you were going to do that.
Did you?
I did. So I'll start and you can fill in. So what happens here is that they tell us that there's another famine. There was a famine during Abraham's time, and Abraham took the family down to Egypt. God told him not to go all the way down there. And Abraham, you know, we act like Abraham always obeyed God. He didn't always obey God because none of the people in the Bible are perfect. But Isaac, there's another, so this is a generation later. This is Jacob's dad, and there is a famine. And Isaac is headed down. And another important thing is these are nomadic people. You know, people are not living in some housing development here. They're living in tents. And even though they stay in one place for a while, they're in tents and they're always moving.
Yeah, they may stay for a while, but they move along. At this time, the symbol, the old Proto-Hebrew, the symbol for the house. And remember, a house can either be a place where you stay or it can be your descendants. But the symbol for a house is basically it's a tent. It's a representation of a tent. And a son, the word that you write for a son is the house. And then it's a picture of a seed sprouting out of the ground. It is the house continues. That's what a son is the house continued. So yeah, they're nomadic. And when the famine comes, Isaac's just going to cut out and go to Egypt. And God tells him, don't stay here, live in this land as foreigners, you know, as a sojourner, basically is the word, and I'll bless you. Don't run off to Egypt. And he is blessed. Can I make it pretty quick? He's staying there and he keeps succeeding. And the people who live there feel threatened. And they fill in some of the old wells that Abraham dug. They literally put dirt in a well. In that country, that's a serious thing. And so they're trying to starve him out. They want to get rid of him. His family keeps expanding, his household, because they're not all family, but they keep expanding. And they're threatened. And then there's a point where Isaac digs a new well, and these local ranchers come up and say, no, that's ours. You're a foreigner, that's ours. And they take it from him. And he, rather than fight them, moves on. And he does it again, and they do it with the next well. And he finally gets to a place, and they don't bother him, and he prospers, he thrives. God does exactly what he said he was going to do. And you know, there's a point where they say, you need to leave. You're too powerful for us. And he does, and that's sort of Isaac. Isaac doesn't have a lot of story about him because he's one of these guys that doesn't fight, and he trusts God to take care of them.
I am going to read verse 3 and 4. When God is talking to Isaac, he says to him, for I will give you all the lands. I will give all these lands to you and your offspring, and I will confirm the oath I swore to your father, Abraham. I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky. I will give them all these lands, and through your offspring, all nations of the earth will be blessed, because Abraham listened to my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws.
This was the promise to Abraham, the blessing of Abraham, now being repeated to his son. And he says, you've done what I asked of you. You didn't run off to Egypt. And he says, I'm gonna tell you that this promise that I made to your father now applies to you. And you heard it. Your offspring will be as numerous as the stars. And you know, that's, I mean, the idea is there's a lot of them. Your offspring will be as numerous as the stars. And through you, through your descendants, all the nations of the world will be blessed. It just, you know, that's the theme of this family. 26 is the story mostly of Isaac, and you can tell what
The last two verses. Oh, you were going to say that? Go
it
ahead.
was.
Okay,
Go right ahead.
is catching up on what's happening with Esau. When Esau was 40 years old, he took as his wives Judith, daughter of Beri the Hittite, and Basemath, daughter of Elon the Hittite, and they brought grief to Isaac and Rebekah.
And that's really for the purpose of this study. The whole thing is, this is Jacob, and this chapter is not about Jacob, but it's important. Those last two sentences, the older brother Esau, the hunter, marries two Hittite women. You know, they have problems with Israel all through the Old Testament, but very pagan, you know, I think they worship Dagon, but he marries these two Hittite women, not good, they weren't really Jews then either, but good Jewish women, these local pagan Hittite women. And the last sentence of 26 says, and they brought grief to Isaac and Rebekah. We don't know what that means exactly, but Isaac and Rebekah were really not happy about the two Hittite brides that Esau marries. And it becomes really important. Those two Hittite wives are not compatible with the way this family runs. That much we know.
And so we're on chapter 27. When Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak that he could no longer see, he called his older son Esau and said to him, my son, here I am, Esau replied. Look, said Isaac, I am now old and I do not know the day of my death. Take your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out into the field to hunt some game for me. Then prepare a tasty dish that I love and bring it to me to eat, so that I may bless you before I die.
The blessing is not the birthright. It's related, but there's also this blessing that comes from father to son, but especially there's one to the firstborn that sort of establishes the oldest son as being the new leader of the household. And what Isaac, it says Isaac is so old, he's essentially blind. And he calls Esau because you want to pass that blessing on from father to son and not just have it hang, you know, if you die, you don't get a chance to really pronounce that blessing. And he says, I don't know the hour of my death. If you try to put it off till the last minute, you could miss it by one day. You know, you could think, oh, well, I would have done it tomorrow, and you die today and you don't get to pass this blessing on. So he calls the son in and he says, I don't know the hour of my death, but I'm feeling it. You know, I'm old, I'm blind. And he says, let's do one last thing. You know, I love the game that you get. Go out and you know, hunt something up and put together one of those meals. Remember when you were a teenager and you used to hunt and you'd barbecue stuff for me and we had, you know, a great time. We'd watch the Packers. I want you to do this for me one more time and bring it in and make one of those special dishes for me. And then I'm going to give you, it could be any time now. Turns out he lives a lot longer, but he's feeling it. And he says, it's time now for me to pass the blessing on and for me to pronounce that you're now going to be the next head of the household.
And something I've learned from studying with you this week is this blessing, there was a belief that God would speak through Isaac to Esau, that blessing would be God inspired.
It is important, and it seems strange to us, but this blessing of the firstborn is recognized as being, you know, God's blessing on the household through the father to the oldest son. It is much more, and it's not just recognized, it appears through several of these stories that it's, you know, it's real. That is what's going on here. And so Isaac is about to convey something really, really big, but he also, you know, he wants to make a little ceremony out of it.
So now Rebekah was listening to what Isaac told his son Esau. So when Esau went into the field to hunt game and bring it back, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "Behold, I overheard your father saying to your brother Esau, bring me some game and prepare me a tasty dish to eat, so that I may bless you in the presence of the Lord before I die. Now, my son, listen to my voice and do exactly as I tell you. Go out to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats, so that I can make them into a tasty dish for your father, the kind he loves. Then take it to your father to eat, so that he may bless you before he dies." Jacob answered his mother Rebekah, "Look, my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I am smooth skinned. What if my father touches me? Then I would be revealed to him as a deceiver, and I would bring upon myself a curse rather than a blessing." His mother replied, "Your curse be on me, my son. Just obey my voice and go get them for me."
Often in royal families, in these societies where there's more than one wife, there's sort of infighting between the wives. They want their offspring to get the best of things, and they fight with each other. In this case, we talked earlier about how Isaac favors Esau and Rebekah favors Jacob, right? So there's always hope until this blessing is conveyed that the one she favors could wind up getting the birthright and getting the blessing. You know, there's always a chance Esau might die. He goes out on a hunting trip and falls off a cliff, and her son, the one she favors, her favorite, winds up being the top dog. But
And there's also the thing that while she was pregnant, God spoke to her, and she's helping God out here.
I would get to that, but
Okay.
what's going on here is that she wants her favorite to be the one who is the top dog. Now it's gotten serious though. Remember, because she sees that when Esau finally finishes this meal and they have their little ceremony, this is the time. There's no going back. And as Mary said, she's been told the older will serve the younger. And she looks and says, what happens if Esau gets the birthright and the blessing? How will that come to be? Now, I don't like that explanation, because what it means is she's saying, well, I know what God said, but he needs a little help. I don't like it because I'm guilty of doing it. You know, I know what I'm supposed to, but I think, I know, God, why don't you say, but you obviously need me to jump in. You're not getting it done. And maybe that's what she's doing. Maybe it's based on that prophecy that she's heard, or maybe that's just how she justifies what she's doing. But she knows Esau is going out to hunt, and she says, quick, Jacob, go out in the pen and get a couple of young goats, because it's going to take him a long time to hunt. We're gonna cheat and make the dish right now, and we're gonna trick your father into giving you the birthright and the blessing. And do you think that's odd? I mean, does anybody think the mother micromanaging this thing, right? So I want to read you something out of the book of John, the Gospel of John. They're at a wedding in Cana, and Jesus' mother was at the wedding, and Jesus had his disciples. Anyway, Jesus' mother came to him and said, they have no more wine. Okay, this is someone she knows, and this is sort of humiliating to be hosting a big wedding and run out of wine. It's worse than a social faux pas that could haunt you for the rest of your life in the little village. And Jesus says to her, woman, why does this concern us? My hour has not yet come. Now you see, this is Jesus saying, it's not my time to reveal something like this. Woman, I'm not going to jump in on this. And what does Mary do? She goes to the servants. His mother said to the servants, do what he tells you. She's micromanaging. She says, my son is a very important rabbi. Just do what he tells you. And she knows he's not going to disobey his mother. And so she's a good Jewish mom. She's doing exactly what Rebecca does here, where she's kind of, she's running the thing, along with her son. It's not, we read these stories and we think, what's a mom doing setting this up? It's certainly not unprecedented. We see it happen with Jesus himself. So the idea is, you're going to go take this red stew to your dad, and he's going to think it's Esau. And Jacob is sort of, everyone labels him as a scoundrel. But even now he says, Mom, if I go in there and my dad happens to feel my arm, he's going to know, and I'm going to be known as a deceiver, and I'll be cursed. I mean, this is not, you honor your father and your mother sort of thing. Even before the 10 Commandments, they knew that. And he said, if I get caught, it's really going to go bad for me. And his mother said, let the curse fall on me if that happens. Just do what I tell you. And she put some goat skins.
No, we haven't gone there.
Beat ahead.
No, we can't. It's the end. It's a cliffhanger.
It's a cliffhanger.
Who would think that the Old Testament could be a cliffhanger? But we will take it up on 27:14 next week.
And we're actually done on time for a change. After all that, I love it when it comes out at a chapter break.
It's not a chapter break.
Okay.
It's the middle of a chapter.
God, when we go into your word, we recognize that it's not by accident that you led, that you inspired people to keep some of these remembrances, that there's things in there for us. They were for people all along the way, and we see that as part of your plan as well. And it's almost intimidating sometimes that we need to pay attention, and we need to find this lesson, these teachings that you've left for us, that without taking the time, we might miss things that give us that life more abundant that you promised. That some of this is on us. And in this story, we see that the people that you've kept these stories of were not perfect. Like us, they're not perfect. They do things sometimes the wrong way. They don't measure up. And yet the big thing that we see is that you have a plan and that you use these broken vessels to accomplish your work. And we'd ask that you'd help us see that and understand that we have work to do and that we're part of that plan. Whether it's in a book, anytime we're part of the plan and we have things to do, help us to understand that and define that in these lessons. The ones that we've prayed for, God, Gene especially is on my heart right now. He's worried, and we all are for his sake. Keep your hand on him and that family. Bring him back to us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you,
You wanna
guys.
Stop the recording.
I do want to stop the recording.